All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Floyd Mayweather Jr. pushing for a Gary Russell Jr. fight over George Kambosos, the undisputed champion, and what that says about boxing. And let's talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Before I get into the subject matter of the video, please make sure to support our betting partner and the sponsor for this video, BUSR. The information will be down here at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you go sign up at busr.ag/Fanon. Use the promotional code Fanon, and you will definitely get value for your money over there at BUSR. Also, make sure you hit the like button, share button, all of that good stuff. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let's get with it. Okay, so the lightweight division will be the subject matter of this video. But more than just the lightweight division, is this the subject matter of what's important in boxing and how Floyd Mayweather Jr. is actually practicing what he preaches, I do believe, in a fight that is rumored. Now, this is a rumor. I've heard this from Leon Muhammad Leon Muhammad had said this. It's a promoter, former guy that used to work with Don King, used to work with Bob Arum, knows his way around the boxing world, said that Floyd Mayweather Jr. was actively trying to make the Gary Russell Jr. fight for Gervonta Tank Davis. Obviously, Gary Russell Jr. has a mandatory coming up, I do believe, in late January, early February with Mark Magsayo, the WBC, his WBC mandatory fight. So obviously, Gary Russell Jr. will have to get past that in order to get to the Gervonta Davis fight. He should be able to do it. Mark Magsayo he's a good fighter, a very strong puncher, but in the last fight that I saw with Mark Magsayo, it looked like he was losing the fight all the way till he knocked the guy out, and I just don't see him being able to walk down, taking shots and walking down Gary Russell Jr. without getting hurt. So obviously I got Gary Russell Jr. in that fight over Mark Magsayo, and then according to Leon Muhammad, the fight with Gervonta Davis and Gary Russell Jr. But also I'm hearing that this is a funny proposition because Gervonta Tank Davis is very well could insist on becoming the mandatory for George Kambosos, which would allow him to fight for at this point in time can be considered the undisputed title at 135 pounds, because George Kambosos has the IBF, the WBA, the WBO, and the WBC and the WBC title that has been franchised. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of nonsense going on as it relates to the WBC and the difference between the franchise champion and the WBC regular champion, or the WBC Pride champion, whatever it is that Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC is calling it. But at the end of the day, according to the WBC, George Kambosos is the undisputed champion and is their highest ranking WBC champion. So that means that Gervonta Davis, because he is the WBC regular champion, could very well petition the WBA to make a fight between him and George Kambosos. But my understanding is Floyd Mayweather Jr. Those guys are not interested in that, and they're not interested in it for the same reasons that they weren't really interested in the fight with Teofimo Lopez, or a fight with Devin Haney before that, or a fight with Vasily Lomachenko, and that is pretty much the money associated with it. And if you look at the fight with a Gary Russell Jr. versus a fight with George Kambosos, you could say, okay, well, why wouldn't there be more money in the George Kambosos fight? Because, obviously the George Kambosos is for undisputed and Gary Russell Jr. is not for undisputed. That's a guy from 126 moving up into the weight class. So you would think that there would be more money with the George Kambosos fight. Well, not necessarily true, seeing as one of two things. George Kambosos is not necessarily a very, very big name in American boxing. He has one title defend. He has one victory, major victory over Teofimo Lopez, and Teofimo Lopez himself had not gotten to the point of being a very, very big draw. However, what George Kambosos is most definitely going to want for that fight with Gervonta Davis is a lot of money to fight him. And he more than likely is going to want to have a purse split, which is closer to 50-50 with George Kambosos. And if he went to purse bid, because Gervonta Davis wouldn't want to do that, then you even have a worse purse bid scenario, unless the WBA looks and says, okay, we have to look at what your purses were over your last couple fights and average it out and see what the situation was. But in that situation, you would probably be having the purse split be in favor of the challenger, and I'm not quite sure if they're going to do that. So, but when you fight Gary Russell Jr., more than likely Gary Russell Jr. is not going to be complaining about, even a 70-30 split on pay-per-views and things like that with Gervonta Davis, because he probably just wants the fight to get on the pay-per-view and honestly to get an opportunity to be out there and to beat Gervonta Davis. So the combination and also Gary Russell Jr. versus Gervonta Tank Davis, if they have that fight in the New York area, say they take that to the Barclays like they used to do, the Barclays Center in New York, the fact that you have somebody from Baltimore and you have somebody from DC fighting one another would probably get a lot of people going to that fight in the Barclays Center and pretty much selling out the Barclays Center. I wouldn't be surprised if they went to Madison Square Garden if they couldn't do very, very big numbers in Madison Square Garden. But as you see with Floyd Mayweather Jr., it's not going to be about the belts for Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis has already said that he would like to fight George Kambosos, but he's like, man, come see me. I'd like to beat you, but you can keep all of those belts. So if we're going to see, and this is a scenario. Let me put it this way: this is a scenario where if it is true that they are willing to fight Gary Russell Jr., and I'm telling you, I'm saying this, if it was true, and I have not heard anybody come out and from either one of those camps and say, nah, that's not the truth. So they might be just trying to, keep it hush hush or whatever. But this might be a situation where, because we're not getting the belts, we're actually going to get a better fight, because Gervonta Davis versus Gary Russell Jr. is a tremendous, tremendous fight. And I think it's probably a little bit, as far as in the ring, I think it might be a better fight than Gervonta Davis versus George Kambosos, because George Kambosos, although he has all those belts, is not as proven a fighter as Gary Russell Jr. in my opinion. And again, since these guys are from the same area, these guys are about the same size. Gervonta Davis obviously a lot bigger, more thicker and bigger than Gary Russell Jr. But Gary Russell Jr. felt like he could comfortably fight at 130 pounds. He said he may, at the outside of what he's doing, make it to 135. And I think that's pretty much the same thing that where Gervonta Davis is, where he could fight at 130 pounds if he wanted to be very disciplined and make weight. 135 is probably a better weight division for him, but once you get up into 140, I think it's too big for him. And eventually, because Gervonta has to stay in that 135-pound range, his competition level is going to be going up soon, because he's going to be running out of guys. He's going to be running out of lesser guys to fight right now. And I'm not saying that that's what they're looking for, because I just do really believe that they are trying to make sure that they just make as much money as they can with Gervonta Davis, for Gervonta Davis, off Gervonta Davis, however you want to say it. But in this particular situation, hey, dude, I'll take it. And then hopefully, once, the belt situation works itself out, that, eventually maybe the winner of this can get the George Kambosos versus the winner of Devin Haney, because that's honestly who I would really love to see George Kambosos fight, is Devin Haney, because Devin Haney deserves that shot from what all that stuff going on with the WBC. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.